start the recording. I'll probably edit some of it out and stuff like that.
Yep.
Starting this out. Hello, Gavin.
What up?
How's it going?
Not too bad. Shut up, Instagram.
Yeah, I completely turned that off because it's just so annoying to deal with.
I know, right?
So first, going to start off introducing yourself so people can know who you are. You're very good with like evidence-based science and nutrition and stuff like that. So I like more people to get like a general idea of the things that you do, and hopefully we can get you some male clients.
Seriously, I had one male client. That's it. And he's not working with me because he and his girlfriend can't afford me.
What? It's crazy. I mean, you do such a good job that I'm actually kind of like impressed that I'm surprised that you don't get a lot of more. Yeah, like male clients specifically. It's like, I don't know why.
Everybody thinks it's like, oh, he only has female clients. So, you know, they think, oh, he probably can't work with a male client. But the fact is, I feel like if you can do really well with a female client and all their needs, when you go to a guy who has much less needs and it's much easier to micromanage, like it's just so much, it works so much better.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier too, except you'll have to like take into consideration like hormone imbalance and when they have like their periods and stuff like that.
And the psychological considerations as well. Guys typically are not, you know, prone to having, you know, disordered eating patterns and things like that. You know, I've never had a stress ball male client.
Yeah. The only thing about that is like the continuous, like stressful, psychological, mental image of what they have and what they look like. With guys, that seems to be like a pattern that me and you probably.
Oh yeah, no, it's like, you know, they think that they could be 300 pounds and 10% body fat. You know, they could step on stage in like 12 weeks, and they think that they look fat and they think they look small. Yeah. I mean, I feel I look like fat and small, and I'm like 25 pounds above stage right now.
Yeah, and it's even worse when you get towards like the last few weeks of contest prep.
Oh gosh, don't even get me started on that. Like, I was like 3 weeks out, and I was like, oh shit, I look so small.
Yeah,
or when you're
like very psychological
weight class and you're like, you know, 8 pounds above your weight cap, and then you worry about having to make weight. Or like you're like 5 weeks out, you have like 8 pounds to go, and all of a sudden you decide to throw in your orals for your hardeners, and all of a sudden your weight jumps up even more, and you're like, oh shit, I have 10 pounds to lose.
Yeah, that's the only thing I hate about Classic is just like the last 4 to 5 weeks, you're kind of just like struggling trying to make through weight, and then you're just like, am I gonna make this? Am I too short? What's my height? Like, do I like fit the category or no?
Well, the problem for me was I thought I was 5'10", because normally at the doctor I was 5'10", so my weight cap was 197. Yeah. And the morning of check-ins, I was like 201 or 202. And so I had to go into the sauna to drop an extra 5 or 6 pounds. I ended up weighing at 194. Come to find out, they measured my height. I was 5'11". I could have been 205.
I've been there.
Yep. It's even worse when you're ready to be at a higher weight class because your height is where it's supposed to be, and they measure you short, and then you have to drop like 7 pounds in like a few hours.
Yeah, that's the worst. But again, I like to have you introduce yourself, your credentials and stuff like that, because I did know we had to wait till Wednesday to make sure that went through.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Okay, so my name is Gavin McCort. I am the head coach for evidence-based performance coaching. I have a bachelor's in dietetics and nutrition, and I am about to take my exam to become a registered dietitian. I've been coaching since the end of 2015. So I competed, my first year competing was in 2015. And then afterwards, because I worked with some reputable coaches and I learned a lot from them and I learned a lot prior, a bunch of people were like, hey, can you help me prepare for a show? I prepped one girl in 2015. And then a friend of mine he's the guy that owns EBP. He asked if I could, if I wanted to partner up with him and start coaching, because I got probably about 20, 30 emails and messages at the beginning of 2016 saying, hey, you should get into coaching. You know what you're doing. And this is like back in the day when like there was the IIFYM like official Facebook page before that, shit the bed. And people
we're still on there, by the way. I'm still on there, I think.
I got banned like 6 years, not 6 years ago. It was probably about 4 years ago. I was banned about like 2016, like right after I started coaching. Anthony banned me from there because I was always answering questions for people instead of letting his moderators answer the questions so that he can make money off people.
Yeah, it's a typical thing that tends to happen in the fitness industry. So I'm going to start with our first question I had from one of my followers on Instagram.
Sure.
Make it a little bit more interactive so I can ask you some questions and stuff like that. So
That'd
the first question that came up is upper lower versus push pull legs. What are your thoughts? What do you think? Pros and cons?
Okay, so I typically like to see things like a steady progression in terms of beginner, intermediate, advanced in terms of programming. So typically I would probably start somebody with like a full body split, let them get used to motor patterns and gain strength there. Once they've gotten very strong doing that, then I typically progress to an upper lower split, typically probably about 4 days a week. I've seen people go as high as 6. I don't think people can recover very well from that, especially if they're applying the intensity they should.
Mm-hmm.
And then for advanced, you typically see people do more the push-pull legs, where you're able to apply a greater amount of volume in a given session. And depending on how you set things up, you can regulate the intensity pretty well. But, I did push-pull legs for a while. And then recently I went back to an upper-lower split because I'm doing dog crap training. And I feel like that can work really well. But it's one of those things where if you apply the correct amount of intensity, you cannot do a ton of volume. So you can't do the principles of DC training in a full body or a push pull leg split, just because it's so taxing on the CNS. But I feel like the way that upper lower and push pull legs are usually set up, I would say that upper lower probably be like a beginner intermediate or like middle range intermediate, and like push pull legs would be more towards like your advanced, your person that needs that much more volume, or they're able to apply proper intensity to a particular amount of volume in a given session. But it all depends, because like I said, DC training is more of an advanced protocol, but it's for people that are actually able to go to that deep level of intensity where you can't do a lot of volume for that.
And that's so true. The past few years since I've been training, I kind of seem to get into that pattern where I feel like if I do like a push pull legs, the intensity is just not there as if it was with an upper lower or like a full body split, which is why I tend to like say, hey, if you're somebody who's about to do like a full body split, you can't do like 4 or 5 sets per body part and then hit it in the next day. It's like your recovery is going to tank, and it's just not going to be a good thing that's not an ideal routine. And it's just so funny because like nowadays in like the science evidence-based community, people are pushing hard for like upper lower and full body splits with just like high intensity and just like higher frequency. I'm just like, how are you programming these things? And sometimes the program is just like so much volume. It's just like you can't recover from that. And again, I actually just made a video on it, which is based on like when you're in like a stressful environment, you just can't grow. You have to be in a less stressful environment to actually optimize muscle gains.
Yeah, and how I see it, if you're doing full body and you're going to be doing like a higher intensity approach, you can't do, high intensity and high loading on upper body and lower body in the same session. You kind of have to have a give and take kind of thing. Like, because I know you've looked at the fortitude training approach by Dr. Scott Stevenson. He has like your first 2 days, it's like heavy on one portion. You're doing pump work for the lower portion. It's lower CNS, stress on your CNS. And so it's kind of more like active recovery in a sense. And then like one day is going to be more focused on upper body with the intensity technique, and then a little bit of lower body. And then the other day is going to be some mostly lower body and some upper body. So it's like you're not going balls to the wall on every portion every single day. And, you can't do that for probably more than 6 to 8 weeks anyway before you need to deload. And most people don't even factor in deloading because they think, oh, well, I just need to eat more. It's like, it's not always about eating more or sleeping better. There is still a finite amount of recovery you're able to do given, the neurological demand you're putting on the body.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's a good thing that this actually came up right after I made that video, because this was also something I wanted to talk about. And
Mm-hmm.
good that like this person asked that question about like the upper lower versus the push pull. And I'm glad that was the first thing on the list that we got away with. So moving forward, our next question is so somebody asked what's the difference between powerlifting and bodybuilding training?
Okay, so powerlifting is typically just force production, so moving weight from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible, and moving the most amount of weight from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible. Whereas bodybuilding, you're putting a more concentrated effort into how you perform a movement because you're trying to target a certain muscle. So you can't necessarily do things in the way that a powerlifter would, whereas like a powerlifter might use a very wide grip bench press with a very exaggerated arch, and they may have like a 2 or 3 inch range of motion, which is great for powerlifting. It's well within the rules and regulations of their federations. But when it comes to putting, a muscle through a full range of motion to maximize hypertrophy, it's just not working. Same thing with like squats. A lot of times they tend to, I've seen a lot of them, they drop into the hole faster rather than control the negative, explode into the positive. They don't perform squats in a way that would be able to target a certain muscle group, for instance. And a lot of times you're just focusing on the big three. So you're focusing on, your bench press, your squat, and your deadlift, and you might have some accessory movements to help bring up weaknesses in those lifts, but you are doing it to bring up a lift. You're not doing it to bring up a body part.
And I think that's where a lot of like average gym goers and just like beginners in general is that when they do go to the gym, that is typically how they lift. Because the first few years of lifting show is like, I got to lift heavy, but they don't really properly execute the exercise, good form, slow, controlled reps, and good technique. Ironically, I was doing legs today, and I actually dropped my weight with leg curls from 160 for like maybe like 12 to 15 to 90 pounds. And I really, I was able to get the eccentric motion, the contraption, slow control rep, pause at the top. And to be honest with you,
it felt heavier, I bet.
Yeah, it felt heavier towards like the 18, 17 set. And I'm just like, oh, wow, why is this so hard? Why is this so difficult?
Yeah, I mean, you're doing half the weight, but you're increasing the amount of actual activation you're doing. So even if you did like a 15 rep set, that 15th rep would probably feel harder than if you were to do it on a heavier weight and you're just swinging the weight around.
And it really did. I was like, okay, I'm kind of like trying to reevaluate the way that I train, because every so often I'd go really heavy for a short period of time, and I'm just like, maybe I should just back off a little, focus more on the tension, the contraction, the eccentric motion, slow controlled, execute the technique in a way where it's like, it definitely isolate that specific muscle group that you're working versus say, hey man, I'm just going to lift the weight. So kind of thing. So yeah, I might have to rethink my approach once again. I've done this so many times, but it's good to have this mentality to be like, okay, I just got to start from scratch. And just a lot of people just don't have that mentality, and they always just go with the whole, hey, I gotta lift heavy to get big. But you're not like, if you're lifting heavy, you're not like focusing on that particular body part, and your pumps are just like distributed overall throughout like whatever you're working. Like if you're doing chest, you want to be able to feel that pump on your chest strictly, and not like your shoulders, your triceps, your biceps, like whatever else. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the difference in that. Is just like more is more. It's more focused on like, again, hypertrophy, and then one is just like exerting the maximum amount of force to be able to lift from point A to point B. So yeah, so that's also a pretty good question. Next one on the list, that's you're a lot more specialized in this than I am, because you have a nutrition and dietitian background. What's your opinion on keto for cutting? That's the first half of the question. The second half is, I thought it was funny that they asked us, introducing carbs in your bulking. So the first question is like, what's your opinion on keto for cutting? And then we'll go to the second half of it.
Okay, so when it comes to keto, I typically like to look at diets for bodybuilders in general from a performance standpoint. So when you are talking about cellular energy production, you're looking at macronutrients enter the cell enter the mitochondria to be converted into ATP. Glucose is going to be much more readily available to be converted into ATP versus free fatty acids. So typically you're going to be able to perform better on a higher carbohydrate diet versus a ketogenic diet. And that's very important when you're trying to diet, because what's the goal? You want to lose body fat and you want to maintain as much muscle as possible. And if you want to maintain as much muscle as possible, you have to be able to maintain strength and performance. I don't think it makes sense to necessarily do a ketogenic diet as a bodybuilder, because your ability to produce energy is not nearly as good as if you were running on carbohydrates. So your performance is typically going to take a dip, and then you have a higher risk of losing muscle mass as a result of a drop in your performance. And when it comes to like introducing carbohydrates in a bulk, it depends on where your end portion was when you were in a caloric deficit. So typically, I look at it from more of a caloric standpoint than just strictly carbohydrates. So like, let's say, you ended a fat loss phase and you got down to 2,000 calories. And when you estimated your maintenance calories and, maybe subtract about 10% for adaptive thermogenesis, let's say your maintenance calories were 3,500. Well, I would bring your estimated maintenance calories up to that 3,500. And typically I like to do protein and fats based around your body weight. So, between 1 and 1.25 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and usually about 0.35 to 0.4 grams of fat per pound of body weight. And then I just
dump in the
carbs, and then just distribute them in either the most convenient way for you, or do it in a way that, digests very well and allows you to maximize performance. Like for me, I actually do better if I've less carbs pre-workout and more intra and post-workout, because I tend to have a dip in blood sugar unless I have an intra-workout. If I have a larger carbohydrate meal pre-workout, because I typically like to have less fats pre-workout, just so I'll have faster gastric emptying, because I don't like training with a full stomach or anything like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't have an issue with. I can just dump maybe 200-300 grams of carbs, just go work out like an hour or two later, and all of a sudden it's fully digested, and I'm just like, okay, the pumps are great. I actually
perform like shit.
Yeah, I perform a lot better with like high carbs, and I'm just like, okay. So I abuse the hell out of it just because of that. But yes, I do agree with what you said on the ketogenic diet. Is like it's not optimal for bodybuilding. And then also that initial weight loss that happens like the first week or 2 weeks when you're doing keto is all you're just losing water retention because your carbs are so ridiculously low. And yeah, you're going to lose like drastic weight, but it's just like you're just losing water for the first.
Yeah, you're losing glycogen stores, or maybe a little bit of body fat depending on how big of your caloric deficit is, but you're losing body fat, you're losing water weight. And the problem with that is you're losing a lot of water weight. You're also losing electrolytes. That's what a lot of people that do a ketogenic diet don't take into account, is they need to replace sodium and potassium properly, because you're holding less water. You're typically holding less electrolytes as well.
And that also hinders your progress at the gym, because to be honest, I don't think a lot of people know this, but you need that extra water retention to lift heavy.
Oh yeah. Like what I tell people is, like, if you are going to be like, let's say you're at the very end of a prep and you have to do a low carbohydrate approach just because that's what your caloric needs demand. I typically load people up on sodium just because it's going to create more cellular hydration, more hydration in the muscle, and you're going to get better contractions and better performance out of that. Because I guarantee you find somebody that doesn't salt their food and ask them how their performance is, they probably like, oh, it feels like shit. I can't even get a pump or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Because you just don't have those carbs and those sources to kind of make you look fuller and just get overall like muscle aspiration. But yeah, I'm strongly against the ketogenic diet. I laugh at it at times, but I guess everyone does. But now that we talked about the bodybuilding aspect of it, let's say for your average individual who's just looking for weight loss, what would be the comparison, like the difference, or actually what would be the pros and cons when someone's just like not into bodybuilding, but they just want like general weight loss? Do you think that is sustainable for somebody who's just like your average gym goer who just wants to lose weight? Like, let's say an overweight individual.
Like it can work depending on what their lifestyle's like, but for a lot of people, due to like environmental factors, like you're not going to be able to just be around friends and family and just say, hey, I can't have carbs, because it's just going to create more of that, is that peer pressure. But when it comes to like just for yourself, for weight loss, especially if you have like, not even like your average gym goer, but like an average person, they're sedentary, it could be very beneficial because protein's very satiating. It's the most satiating of the 3 macronutrients. Fat delays gastric emptying, so it slows down digestion, so it can keep you fuller for longer. And typically, I mean, if you're getting in like 20, 30 grams of carbohydrates through straight vegetables, you could get in quite a bit of vegetables in that given volume. So for an average person, it can be good. But here's where I see the detriment from a psychological standpoint is you have that initial weight loss, and then the average person's like, oh, yay, I'm losing all this weight.
Yeah.
And then it starts to slow down. Mm-hmm. And because they don't see that drastic weight loss over time, they lose motivation. Instead of if they saw gradual weight loss over time, and they still felt good, you know, they probably feel a little bit better because it's not like, oh, I had this big drop, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
It just stalls.
And then sometimes when that happens, people tend to go back to their old ways, back to, oh, this isn't working out, so now I got to eat more. And then they gain everything that they lost all back, and maybe sometimes it may be even more. And then they get like frustrated, just like, oh, this isn't working anymore. And then they
have that rage quit, fuck it moment.
Yeah, right. And that's the worst. Good. Next question is, I personally don't have an Instagram icon or a bodybuilder that I look up to. I've never have. I always just thought it's weird to look up to individuals based on their athletic or physical performances or how they are. But the question that's coming up is like, what's your favorite Instagram / bodybuilding icon?
Okay, so I have 2, and most of them, it's just, actually, no, I could say 3, but it's more so because of the intellectual contributions they brought to the bodybuilding world. So my first one, he's probably the guy that's been in the game the longest, is Dante Trudell. He owns True Nutrition. He worked with Intense Muscle way back in the day. And he is the guy that started DC training back in the 90s.
Yes.
And I like what he has to say because a lot of the principles that he introduced and a lot of the concepts he introduced are things that are being confirmed more now through scientific research. Like he popularized rest pause sets back in the day and popularized a higher intensity, low volume approach similar to what Dorian Yates did, except he did it a little bit more frequency compared to Dorian. And now they're putting more research into higher intensity training, lower volume being a viable approach to gaining muscle. And for some people, it's actually better than a higher volume approach. He also popularized extreme weighted stretches after training a certain body part as another way to induce hypertrophy. At the time, they thought it was to stretch the fascia that surround the muscle, which I'll be honest, is complete bullshit for the most part, because fascia that surrounds the muscle is as strong as steel. So you're not going to be stretching that with just a weighted exercise. But they have shown that it has kind of like an occluded effect, similar to like occlusion training, blood flow restriction training. So it's another way to induce a stimulus in addition to heavy loading. And then the third thing is importance of health supplementation. So I actually posted I
saw it.
Yeah, on my Instagram.
And all that stuff. I just saw it earlier on my Facebook.
Yeah, so like I posted how I had high blood pressure, and he had been talking a lot about ways to reduce blood pressure in bodybuilders that were hypertensive. And I utilized a lot of the supplementation and, lifestyle modifications, and I was able to drop my blood pressure 45 points in a month. I went from 180 over 111 down to 132 over 82 this morning. So I would say probably in another month or so, I might be back down to a normal range, being like the 120s, which is where I want to be. And I'm currently cruising right now. So that's one thing to take into consideration. But, when you're blasting, it's even more important to take care of blood pressure and kidney health versus just ignoring it, because a lot of bodybuilders, they end up blowing out their kidneys if their blood pressure is too high. So the second one I like would be Dr. Scott Stevenson, who he's one of the guys I've learned the most from. I utilized his book and everything during my last prep, and it was my fault that things didn't go the way they should have at the very end. But I learned a lot from things that he's put out. I had never done a full body approach before. I read Fortitude Training in 2016, and I did that for probably about 3 years. So I actually attribute that and a lot of the other things I was doing to putting on, 35 pounds of stage weight in about 3 years.
Nice. It's very inspiring. For me, I just find it so difficult to look up to individuals. People like Scott Stevenson, I can't talk about
Stevenson.
Scott, and Mike Israetel.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, Lyle.
Hey, I like
Lyle. They do give out pretty good information, especially Lyle. Even though sometimes he can go a little.
He has his tangents, but I mean, the dude, you got to look at the information he puts out, not necessarily the way he puts it out, because the guy is very abrasive, and if you don't get his way of thinking or his sense of humor, you're gonna take it the wrong way and probably get a little butthurt.
Yeah. There's been a few encounters with Lyle.
I've been in his group. I've brushed him the wrong way. I got called a fucking idiot quite a few times.
Yeah. He blocked me on Facebook. When I was young, I didn't really knew much about the stuff that he produced and all the scientific based research, and I'm just okay, I kind of regret it now, but at the same time I do go back to his body recomposition website and kind of scroll down the weekly or daily articles that he posts, and I'm just okay, this is some pretty good stuff. But I mean, again, I don't particularly have people that I want to consider as an icon, but there are certain individuals that have good source of information and materials that they put out. And I'm just wow, this is great. Mike, for example, I occasionally work out with him when I get a chance, and the amount of stuff that he teaches me while I work out, I'm just oh, so this is what you do. This is how you do this.
It changes the way you perceive things and the way you look at bodybuilding in general.
Yeah, it changes your entire perspective on how to approach training and diet, and it's just so interesting. But moving forward to our next question is somebody asked, is working out for 3 hours too much?
Yes, I would typically say working out for 3 hours is too much, and it's for one main reason. For this reason, you may say it's not enough. But the main reason is if you're able to train for 3 hours, you're probably training like a fucking pussy. If you need to train, I can see a power lifter may train for 2.5 hours because they may take 5 to 10 minute rest breaks in between attempts at a 1 RM. But for a bodybuilder, if you're training that long, you're doing way too much volume and you're leaving way too many reps in reserve, way too little intensity, and like I said, just to be flat honest, you're training like a pussy.
Exactly. I remember when I was younger, I would spend up to 3 to 4 hours at the gym just training.
Yeah, I probably spent 2.5 hours when I was doing 20 sets per 20 to 25 sets per body part per week, and I was doing I was doing push-pull legs back when I first started competitive bodybuilding, and one session might take me 2.5 hours. I might do 5 sets per exercise.
And it's just so interesting how that whole thing started, is because we were younger. There wasn't really that much information out there that we have today, which is about 10, 20 years from now, 10, 20 years ago. We always focused on hey, let's go into bodybuilding forum and kind of just look at what they're doing and then copy their exact same routine. And then it just never turns out the way that we quite expected. Because when you look at these magazines, these things that these like professional bodybuilders, fitness models like put out, these are not routines that are sustainable for like the average individual. They're mainly just for people who are on a buttload of gear and have really, really great genetics. And you can't apply that exact same thing to the general population, which is why like when people ask me, hey man, would you think about like the Muscle magazine or stuff like, I'm just like, I don't read it.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I look at like the genetically gifted bodybuilders and the way they train, one that I typically I remember from the 90s is Paul Dillette, because he would look at a weight and he would grow. Like, it doesn't matter how he trains, he'll put on muscle. Like, he could freaking curl 10, 15-pound dumbbells and he'll still have 25-inch arms.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And then you look at people like Jordan Peters, for instance.
John Meadow, for example.
John Meadows, yes. I like the way he trains.
Yeah.
You also look like Jordan Peters. He started out as like a 5'6", 145-pound soaking wet at his first show like 15 years ago. Yeah. And he's put on 100 pounds of stage weight since then. And like, he trains methodically. He emphasizes progressive overload. Like, he was one of the guys that really popularized training like not full body, upper lower push pull legs back in like the, between like 2012, 2018. But he was the guy that you would always see on Instagram lifting like crazy amounts of weight, just because he's gotten to that point where that's what he needs to do in order to progress.
Yeah, and it does become to a certain point where if you're a beginner, lower frequency and lower volume are just not going to cut it, which is why it's always good to switch to higher frequency and more volume, because like the more advanced you are in bodybuilding, the more volume you need to do at a certain point. And I think the fact that like when the magazines were out, and like all these people are like making all these like workout routines, is that these individuals are so advanced that they do such high amount of volume. And then when you look at it, you're just like, oh, I got to do that too. But then you realize you're just a beginner. You can't just like do such high volume compared to like what some pro bodybuilder does. You have to kind of like eventually start low, gradually work your way up. And then the more advanced you get, the more volume you'll get. I think Mike Israetel once told me that like you're going to need to work a lot harder when you get advanced, like a lot harder.
Well, one point I was going to make is, as you get more advanced, you need more volume, like up to a point, because as you get more advanced, you are able to mentally apply the amount of intensity. You're able to mentally connect with the muscle a lot better. So you can make better use out of individual sets. Compared to like when you're first starting out, it may take you 3 to 4 work sets to actually get to the point where it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel the muscle now. So you needed those extra sets just to be able to get to that point. Whereas once you get more advanced, you can apply that much sooner in a session. So you could have gotten away with like 20 sets, 25 sets for chest in a week before, but majority of those sets were fluff work, I guess you could say. They were not very strenuous at all. Yeah. Whereas as you get more advanced, you may get to the point where you can only handle 8 to 10 sets in a given work week, just because of the amount of intensity that you're applying. If you choose to go the route of higher intensity on every set, whereas like people look at like a John Meadows program, it may say, oh, you're doing 13 sets for a body part, but it's working up to a top set. So it may say 13 sets, but it may only be five all out sets in a workout. So it's completely different compared to if you were to do 10, 15 all out sets for a given body part in a workout. You're probably not gonna be able to apply maximum effort on all 15 of those sets.
So you got to like work your way to it. When I was younger, I actually discovered that on purpose. I mean, by accident, because I realized Dorian Yates did his routine where he was just like training 1 to 2 reps, 1 to 2 sets to like failure. I tried his routine. Was it blood and guts, I think? So I tried that routine and I realized, okay, I can't do this. The reason why I can't do this is because like,
You thought you needed more.
yeah, it's like it's such high intensity. I needed more. So I was like, okay. I backed off for a little and sort of I modify it in a way where it was like suitable. But it's interesting because like now that I'm older, I'm just like, I was doing this like 5, 6 years ago. But,
Right?
yeah, but like what I did was added more warm-up sets on every single exercise. Yep. And then just keep that maximum effort on those 1 to 2 sets, and then I would blow up. But it's not like I'm just going straight to like, hey, I just finished bench. Now to kind of just go straight to like a heavy working set of like barbell curls if you're doing like chest and biceps.
Yep.
But the thing is, you have to like warm up and kind of just like, I think what I call like feeler sets.
Yeah, you know, feelers. I call them what? I can't remember what I used to call them.
Yeah, but essentially, you would do warm up sets, working up towards your working sets. And I think when I post my workouts on Instagram, that's the one thing I don't include because
those are warm-up sets. Yeah, like you may do 3 to 5 warm-up sets to get to your working weight, exactly. But you may only do like a heavy lower rep set, and you might do a lighter back off set, and people see 2 sets. They're like, oh, well,
that's much. Yeah, it's like, this is insane, but there's like so much more. I just can't be like, I do this and this, so and then so and stuff like that. And but it's funny that me and my coach agreed on this method because I was like doing this way before I even met my coach, and I was just like, oh, I remember this. Now we're doing this again.
Yep.
But it's a lot more like, it's a lot more optimal at this point because I'm just at that point where I think I'm like maybe intermediate going to advanced, and I need to have somebody to kind of like watch over my routine and be like, dude, don't do anything crazy. Just don't have a coach. But yeah, so yeah, definitely. And also to finish up with that question is like my workouts are a lot less. It's like,
yeah, like my workouts are probably about an hour and a half. If I'm you know fucking around and I'm talking to people and paying too much attention to my phone, it might take an hour and a half. Yeah. Typically it's about an hour and 15 because I'm doing maybe 10 work sets per per workout.
Yeah. And I always like to kind of go back to Charlie's question where the guy asked him, hey, man, what do you do after you're done working out? He's just like, I just go home.
I just go home. Yeah.
You just fucking go home. It's like, why are you here? It's like, you're done working out. And the thing with that is like, the more time that you spend at the gym with that like 3 hours of just straight junk volume or just doing whatever bullshit that you decide to come up with.
You're taking away time for recovering.
Exactly. And you're in a very highly catabolic environment and you're not going to grow. And the only way for you to grow is to be in a more anabolic environment, which allows for rest, recovery, eat, relax, and just reduce your stress level. So that's a lot of things that a lot of people just don't pay attention to. But I can't really blame them because for me to even get to that point to realize that, I was like, I had a bunch of like trial and errors here and there. And
oh yeah.
We all have to go through that regardless. Whether
unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's what makes this whole thing a bit of a journey because you learn what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you need to add on, what you don't need to add on. It's like the same routine, the same diet will not work for the exact same person.
Yep.
Factors involved, but people just don't take that into consideration. But generally, yeah, it's just like if you're watching this, shorten your workouts.
Hire a coach.
Hire a coach.
Don't just hire anybody. Make sure they know what they're freaking talking about.
Exactly. This isn't really a question from someone, but this is actually a personal question that I have. You being a much more experienced coach than I am, what are the benefits of having a coach?
The main thing is the accountability. Like a lot, like for instance, I coached myself for my last prep and things went pretty well. But, you know, looking back, you know, if you're not seeing the progress on the scale, you become very numbers focused when you do things yourself. And it can cause you to overdo things. You know, you may overdo your calorie deficit. You may overdo cardio. Heck, you may overdo drugs. But I think a lot of it is, you know, having someone to keep you out of your own head and to keep your head out of your own ass.
Mm.
It's because a lot of times people think, oh, they know it all. It's like, no, they have to be, I say, keep an open mind, be willing to learn, and also be willing to admit there's people that are smarter than you that can do your job better than you. And those are the people that you should be turning to when you do need help.
Yeah. And the funny thing about that is, like, my coach is very knowledgeable. And when I tell people, like, yeah, my coach is all natural, they're just like, what? I'm just like, yeah, I trust him a lot more than I'll trust any other coaches. To be honest, I trust him a lot.
Yeah, because like there's not a lot of natural coaches that are willing to dabble in coaching enhanced athletes. Like I would think one of the few is like Cliff Wilson. I think I've seen he has a few clients, I think, that are in the NPC. And I know he has a super heavyweight bodybuilder. He gets on like 230 stage weight. Yeah. Like you definitely know he ain't natty.
Yeah, right, definitely. This is a question from, I think she's a bikini or somewhere around like your alley of coaching.
Okay.
I was really kind of confused by this question, but I feel like they do know a lot more than I usually expect. But they did ask, like, what foods do you notice help the most with belly fat?
There are no foods that help with belly fat. What people don't really understand is body fat distribution is largely genetic. And so the only way to remove belly fat is to remove total body fat, because your body will strip fat away based on where it prefers to store. So for women, it's typically going to be lower body. Men, it's typically going to be, the trunk, the midsection, lower back. And so, like for me, for instance, I hold a lot of my fat in my glutes and my hamstrings, and I still have a hard time getting that off. And I just keep telling myself, it's like, if you want to get that off, you got to keep dieting. You just got to really dig in and get that last bit off, because that's what you're going to have to do. So in the foods that remove belly fat, there are none. You just have to be in a calorie deficit and just lose more body fat overall.
And just be consistent with
consistent. Yeah, that is the key. You got to consistently put in the effort, be in a caloric deficit, instead of, oh, I'm going to be in a caloric deficit for 3 days, and then they binge and they destroy their 3-day deficit.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me about that.
Been there. That was me the day before my show.
That was me like a week before my show. I was binging hard.
I mean, heck, but you didn't do it the day before the show. I was supposed to get in 750 grams of carbs. I got in 1,100 the day before the show. I spilled over so badly.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But that's definitely something I'm currently trying to work on, which is my consistency and my dieting, and just being able to just listen to my coach. And
listen to your coach, and if you have to, have friends that you see in person to keep you accountable, which is why I like having a lot of my clients, because they kind of help me get my head out of my ass when I have those moments.
Yeah, exactly. And those moments are well appreciated.
Yes, they are.
This was actually question 2, but I wanted to skip it because I knew eventually we're going to get to the point where we talk about like body fat distribution and stuff like that. The question that this person asked is puffy nipples, but yet they have low body fat.
So it could be one of two things. Like some people, they do have kind of pockets of fat in the nipple area, especially if they used to be, overweight, obese, things of that nature. But also if they were overweight and obese, there's a potential that you could, like, if you were that when you were younger, you could have what's called, pubescent gyno. So you could have gyno while you went through puberty, or it could be prepubescent. So it could just be gyno that you got in your teenage years just from hormonal shifts. And if you're enhanced, then it could be that you do have gear-induced gynecomastia, and you should probably get on some raloxifene or some Nolvadex to kind of fix that problem and get your estrogen in check. Or if it's a prolactin issue, get your prolactin in check.
Yeah, exactly. And I also noticed that people that do have like puffy nipples, I mean, it might be related to, like, let's say they're not on gear or anything like that. It could also potentially be that they just have higher estrogen than.
Yeah. Well, because I've like a lot of the studies done on body fat for women, at least, it's, people think that high estrogen leads to high body fat. It's actually the inverse. Higher body fat percentages leads to higher levels of estrogen. So typically a man that has higher estrogen, they could be disposed to having higher levels of overall estrogen in their body.
Perfect. And I do have a question that will be saved for the last, because I've kind of just dived into this last week, and it's a very interesting topic. But moving forward, how many times a week do you work out?
4 days a week. I do Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. I do upper body, and then I do biceps, rear delts, forearms, calves, and legs. So then I'll just alternate those. I have workouts 1 and 2, and I have ABC workouts, and I just rotate through those.
Perfect. Now, in terms of like workout frequency, what are your thoughts on the meal frequency? What do you think is the optimal range that one should eat throughout the day? I do know from scientific research, it is roughly 4 to 6.
Yep. And that's typically what I recommend. Like for me personally, on a training day, I may do 5, maybe 6 meals if I have a hard time getting meals in, larger meals. And then on my rest days where my calories are less, and I typically like to fast a little bit just because I just feel better. It's not no magical benefits for fasting. It's just I feel good. I may have 4 meals, but I typically recommend 4 to 6 meals, evenly spacing out the protein. And then arranging your carbohydrates and fats around the day based on when you train or how you do with protein or carbs and fats around training. But yeah, like I said, 4 to 6 meals, and at the end of the day, it's whatever suits your schedule and it suits your eating habits best. Because at the end of the day, if you are trying to get in 6 meals and your schedule doesn't allow it, it's going to be really hard to get that in. So like if I give a client a meal plan, I typically do it based around their schedule more so than, what could be considered optimal, because optimal is individual based. It's not what's set in stone on paper.
And the funny thing about that is like people who don't like understand the whole bodybuilding method, they're so like closed-minded back to like the old day with like the dogmatic method of just like you have to eat every 2 to 3 hours kind of thing. Like I have so many people ask me, it's like, hey man, do you eat like every 2 to 3 hours? I'm just like, nah. they feel a little bit like disappointed, and I'm just like, it's not like that kind of thing.
Moving on.
Yeah, no, we're not done. I was just asking a question about like.
Oh wait, sorry, I didn't hear the question.
No, you're good. You're good. It wasn't really a question. It was more of just like a comment made towards like meal frequency and how most people who are not like that deep into bodybuilding assume that bodybuilders eat every 2 to 3 hours.
Oh no, like I may not like him that much, and I'm if he sees this, I'm probably going to get blocked by him on social media, but. I don't always agree with what Phil Viz says, but I do agree on things with regards to waiting until your last meal has been digested before you have your next one. Because especially if you have a high carbohydrate diet, you don't want to eat your next meal when your blood glucose is still elevated, because then you have compounding blood glucose, and then you have high blood sugars all day, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
So that, or like post-workout, for instance, you always think, oh, I have to get in my post-workout shake right after I train, when, you're in your nervous system is in a very sympathetic state versus parasympathetic, which deals more so with like digestion. So if your parasympathetic nervous system is downregulated or it's, is down, you're not gonna be able to digest things very well. So it's better if you just take a little bit post-workout, relax, get more into a parasympathetic state versus a sympathetic state, and then eat, because then things will just digest and your blood sugars will be a lot more stable and consistent.
And funny you mentioned like the protein intake post-workout. I remember Alan Aragon mentioned that like when should you take your protein shake after you work out? As soon as possible, but whenever you get the chance to.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's not something that's just like, oh man, I just got done working out. All right, time to drink this protein shake kind of thing. So it's not essentially like that.
Yeah.
But that is one of those like dogmatic myth in the bodybuilding community.
Oh, I will make one more comment on that. So typically how I perceive why people may have the whole concept of the anabolic window is in the bodybuilding circles is people that are utilizing insulin. You know, you probably especially like if you're using like a fast acting insulin peri-workout, you know, by the time you're done training, your glucose may be going towards hypo, and it would be more beneficial to eat that meal right away versus waiting. But like the average person, they're just utilizing their endogenous insulin. It's like, it's not a big deal.
I think that's where that myth actually stemmed from, because back in the day, I'm sure there was a lot more insulin use, and then everyone was just like, "Oh, this bodybuilder is eating right after he works out, but he's trying not to die." That's
like I know Milo Sarcev is like the forefront on insulin usage in bodybuilding, and like he had these, you know, crazy protocols for insulin use around the workout. And yeah, in that case, yeah, it would be beneficial if you slam something post workout, because you're probably going to be piggybacking. You're having another shot piggybacking off the first shot, so you can get those carbs shuttled in and everything.
Exactly. This is actually a question for both you and I. I'm also going to get like a response to this. Somebody asked me, how did you get started with online training? We already explained that, but since you already gave out your answer, I'm going to give out mine.
All right.
I think this is a very interesting thing how I got along with it. So I a lot of people, after like they've competed 1 to 2 shows, they're all of a sudden an online coach.
Oh gosh, don't get me started. People got that concept about me because I did 3 shows before I started coaching, but they didn't see that I had probably about 8 years of research before I even started.
And you're also focused on like your bachelor's degrees.
Well, this is before. Well, when I started competing, it was before I started my bachelor's. I started my bachelor's in 2017. I competed in 2015, but I already knew I wanted to go that route anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So for me personally, I would have started earlier, but I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know what was what. I didn't know what was going on. So what I did was like I hired a bunch of coaches. Not hired them, but like I kind of learned other different like individuals and how to like they figure out their macronutrients, when to change them, when to add, when to like what routines to make, what to target, and focus on like stress management and all that stuff. So I learned some of that while I was being coached, and it actually took me a year or 2 to actually go on my own and just like learn, okay, I need all these things and I have to like put it together. I remember like talking about maybe like a year or 2. I was like, dude, I should totally start the online coaching. It's like, I'm not ready yet. Like, I'm just not ready. And then I was just like, okay. So I took some time, learned a little bit, read a little bit of articles, practiced some stuff here and there, like training with clients at the gym. And then inevitably I was just like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this. It was it was very scary to be able to just jump into that, which is why I'm like so like concerned when people are just like, I just did like 2 shows. Let me be an online coach. I'm just like, holy shit, they're not doing this right now, are they?
No.
It's just like.
Or I know people that never competed before, and they're like, oh, I know how to do this. I've seen how to do this. And then they think they can do it. Like, no, you've never been there. You can't get somebody to a place you haven't been.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. Like, the reason why I don't prep people for a bodybuilding contest is that, yeah, I've competed a few times, but it's just not something I have knowledge on at the moment. So, which is why I'm just practicing with like just your average gym goers just want to make great progress, just want to lose weight. I don't want to be like, hey man, I'm going to take all your money and I'm going to kind of prep you for a show, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't want that, because like if I'm like coaching someone, I want my results to be the best that it can possibly be. I don't want to be like, hey man, let me have your money and then let me just like half-ass everything and then just take your money. I just feel so guilty doing that. And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to like online coaching in the fitness industry, is that a lot of people just don't know what the fuck they're doing.
No. It's like, you know, people always ask me, it's like, well, do you know how to coach men? And because they assume I only know how to coach women. It's like, I started out knowing how to coach myself as a man.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, I learned how to do gear protocols for myself as a man, but I was forced into learning how, you know, women respond to things just through, you know, I had my first 2 clients were both women. And so that forced me to learn. It's like, okay, I got to look into, they were, one of them was enhanced. The other one was natural at the time. They forced me to learn about, you know, female drug protocols, how to avoid side effects, you know, how to, you know, keep hormone levels in a good spot, how to get them out of prep so that they can regain, you know, their menstrual cycle quicker, things like that. And it's like for me, it was kind of like a trial by fire kind of thing.
It's just like, hey man, just jump off a cliff and learn.
Yeah, it was basically, that's what it was.
Like literally.
It's like, if I want to keep my clients, I have to learn, and I forced myself to learn. And now, well, I'd be lucky if I got a male client, but hey, if anybody wants to hire me, hey, I'm all for it.
Yeah, one of these days, man, one of these days, I might take you up on that offer, because I only go with coaches who I trust. Like my very first coach was Russell.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Russell Taylor.
Yes. He was like my very first coach. I mean,
I remember that. That was like 2017?
16, 17.
16.
Like,
yeah.
First show. Cause I was like so disappointed with like my placing when I competed in 2013. I was like, so I went into my very first bodybuilding show prepping for 4 to 6 weeks. And I got wrecked. I got wrecked so hard that like it like literally crushed me. But it was a learning experience. And with learning that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a few years off, train really hard, focus on diet and nutrition and stuff like that. And then I finally decided to hire Russell. So I went from like 16th place all the way to first place the second show. So I was like,
what was that? Is that Pittsburgh?
No, it was the Philadelphia Classic in
okay.
Oh God, I can't remember. 2016?
Yeah, I think it was 2016.
Yeah, it was that. And then like I was like, okay, I placed really well. I guess I'm just gonna get a coach from now on.
Yep. And who'd you work with after that? You worked with Jason, right?
Theobald.
Yeah, Jason Theobald. Yeah.
He was really great. The reason why our thing didn't work out is because my sleep schedule sucked. Like my life's pretty busy. My sleep schedule was so bad. And
you were working night shift at the time, right?
Yeah, I was like doing like.
You were working at Wawa.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Overnights and stuff like that. I was like, I can't do this. It's so difficult. And then the worst part about that is after working like long hours, and then all of a sudden you want to sleep, but you really can't. But then you're surrounded by food, and you're just like, donuts.
Oh, trust me, after my show, there's a Wawa about a quarter mile from my apartment, and I would have cravings at like 2 a.m. I would go raid the donut case.
Yeah, dude, I like wrecked that, and it just
orange cream donuts from Wawa. Go get you some.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Don't remind me. And to finish up everything, our final question is the best way to increase your squats.
Squat more and have it's like the best way to increase your squat is 1, don't overdo it. 2, don't underdo it. 3, get a logbook, track your weight, make sure you are progressing. Don't just stick with the same 225, 315 week to week and expect your squat to go up. If you want your squat to go up, you have to make the effort to increase loading over time, increase the amount of effort that you're able to exert over time, and then know when to pull back so that you can actually let your body recover and you can keep that trend going over time. Because you're not going to gain like 200 pounds in your squat in a year. I mean, if you do, then you probably weren't squatting very well to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. And funny that you said that. I've had like an app on my phone called like J Fit or whatever.
I think I've seen that.
I've had that since 2013.
Oh gosh.
I've been like progressing and just like looking at my logs. Like it helps. It helps to keep track of what you do, and a lot of people just wing it. And you're just like, why are you doing this right now? It's like, why are you winging this? It's just like, you're not going to make like constant progress without knowing like where you need to grow, like what weights you need to add, like what calories do you need to eat and stuff like that, which is why we have like MyFitnessPal to keep track of all these things, because you do have to micromanage these things. And when you don't micromanage things, like how are you going to be like getting the results that you want if you're not keeping track of like the things that you do?
Yeah, it's like that goes into the whole thing with consistency. If you're doing, 300, if you're doing like 3,000 calories one day, 4,000 calories the next day, 2,000 calories a day after that, it's like, well, you're back to square one, basically.
Yeah, and my perfect example that I tell my clients is just like, okay, listen, say you're driving a car, right? And you're driving the car, but you're not really looking at the speedometer. You're just driving and stuff like that. I mean, you might crash. Definitely a high chance you might crash because you're not looking at how fast you're going. Think about that, but then add it towards like weight loss, add it towards like training methods, add it towards like progression over time. Like if you're not looking at where you're going, or like looking at least just like taking a quick glance at like what you're doing, what calories you're eating, you're not gonna go anywhere. You might just end up crashing. You might like undereat and not gain weight. You might eat way too much and get a lot of fats. And all
Well,
that.
like, yeah, that actually could apply very well with training, because you're just like, oh, I'm going to just keep increasing my weight over time. And it's like, then your engine's going to burn out because you're redlining the whole time. And then you have to take like a month off of training because now you have all these injuries that popped up.
Yeah. So like with everyone, I just tell them, listen, if you're driving, sometimes you have to take a look at the speedometer every so often to see how fast or how slow you're going. Because if you're going too slow, somebody's likely going to hit you from the back. If you're going too fast, you're likely going to hit somebody from the front. Just watch what you're doing. So that basically concludes that. And I'm not going to lie, this was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. And it was such an interesting and fun experience to be able to just sit here and just talk about like.
It helps when it's like if it's two people that are easy to talk to with other people. It's like if you're not going, you're a very expository speaker, then it's much easier.
Yeah. I was actually scared. I was like, I didn't know what questions to ask and like stuff like that. But like, it actually went very well, and I'm honestly looking forward to doing more of this.
Yes.
And be able to, we can kind of have this back and forth and post some like stuff on Instagram and stuff like that. And you can also post stuff on your thing, kind of just to get like more people to engage. Because my general goal is I want to help people succeed. And
Same.
I don't want people to like do the exact same thing back and forth, not making any progress, like going to the gym, spending all this amount of money, buying like Gymshark gear when you can just buy a coach or just get a coach.
Don't buy Gymshark. Go to Walmart.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot cheaper too, and you like save yourself a lot of money. Like if
They're both from China.
Yeah, exactly. If they ever try to sponsor me and they look at this video and I'm just like, yo, that kid. Like literally.
Nope.
Yeah, this has been fun and interesting. I'm looking forward to post this. As usual, I like to end up everything with like, do you have like a specific website, a handle, or anything like that people can follow you and kind of just like get a little bit more of like what you're about, your training methods, and all that?
Okay, so on Facebook, I'm Gavin Warren McCort. On Instagram, I am Temple Builder Fitness, all one word. And website is ebpcoaching.com. And my email for coaching is gebp@protonmail.com.
I'm surprised you used that. I used that for something else. But I
use it for that too.
Yeah. All right, cool, perfect. And this concludes this. And yeah, like I said, this was a really great experience, and I'm looking forward to doing more of it. So thank you, Gavin.
Not a problem, bro.
Hey, yeah. That's a matter of figuring out how to like stop this.